Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of Enforce technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by Enforce technology. Only from Tenkata Protective Fabrics.
Welcome back to another episode of Main Street Firefighting, a podcast by Fire Engineering. My name is Lex Shady, and with me is my partner, Chris Tobin. Before we get started, we'd again like to thank Fire Engineering for the opportunity and you all for tuning in. Tonight we're joined by Captain Josh Burchick with the Howard County, Maryland Fire Department. Josh is well known for his company, Forged and Unbroken, where he shares workouts, podcasts, and information on mental toughness and resiliency. We hope you enjoy the conversation, and be sure to check out Josh's work.
Alrighty, well, thanks for joining us, Josh. It's good to have you back. It's pretty cool to have someone, on your podcast, and then I was on your podcast, and it's kind of cool to we always like having a peer podcaster on our show. So before we get started, let's kind of give everyone a run through on your side of things with your company and your work that you're doing out there, which is awesome, by the way. We definitely follow some routines.
Awesome. No, thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, Forged and Unbroken Fire was born out of questions that we continue to get from my crew and I of how do you do this thing? What's your thoughts on that? And the longer I've done this, I've realized that it's not just one single approach, right? Like, we're human beings, we're messy, and there's so much with physical, mental, emotional performance in the fire service. So it's a wide net, but that's kind of what my goal is with Forged and Unbroken, is to have daily workouts for the physical side of it. Once a week, I throw out something that I'm calling like a mini growth mindset podcast. That's it's psychology, it's sociology, it's leadership, it's readiness, it's all kinds of stuff, and it's anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes, and I just break down, hopefully making it street level stuff where you can take back to your firehouse and be like, maybe we can incorporate this into our training, or maybe this is how we're operating when we're stressed out. And then there's my podcast where I get to sit and talk to some really awesome people throughout the nation, and there's early access to that. With my fitness training background, one of my big things is also mobility, injury rehab, or injury prevention. So there's a once a week video with that as well. Just really, we put our bodies through the ringer. So it's a once a week video that we can drop out there that can help you just detension, or maybe get you back on the floor a little bit quicker if you are off on an injury. So there's that. And then just last week, I'm also starting another project with in extremis readiness. And similar to some of the other formats that I have, it's just bite-sized chunks of, I've kind of been thrust into Mayday and preparedness stuff. So it's my view and my biases on what it takes to be prepared for these in extremis environments that we find ourselves in. So it's a very wide net. I've had a lot of people that are not even in the fire service drop into it and get a lot from it. I've been able to rub elbows with people like you, like your podcast from you and Jeff with the St. Louis vibe has gotten incredible feedback, and it's been super cool. So, and then what a little bit of money that this whole project generates every quarter, I take a third of anything that's generated and I throw it right back out into a public safety charity or cause. And I mean, we've raised over $1,000 just in the first year for charities and nonprofits. And then if you're a member of the online community, I also do a quarterly give back, and it's swag, it's rescue equipment. It's just a little thank you to anybody that supported. So that's the short version of what my little side project with Forged and Unbroken Fire and in extremis readiness is.
That's
So
awesome.
thanks for letting me plug that.
Yeah, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that a little bit because, we signed up for it. The workouts we can speak for, they're great. We add them at the end of a lift, and they're great for at the firehouse. I'm not one who says you have to work out at the firehouse every day because sometimes you're busy and in between them you need rest. But if you do have the time and you are rested, those are great to throw in. You can do them with your crew, you can do them by yourself. So we really appreciate that. And then obviously continuing to give back to the fire service. This isn't like a for-profit thing, right? Like, you're not raking in all the money. You're doing stuff. You're giving it back to charities and stuff like that. And we love supporting people that do that kind of stuff. So we appreciate that. Diving into kind of what we're talking about with buildings and stuff today, we wanted to get your take. We're gonna have you kind of talk about your department real fast, but you respond to a wide area, a wide variety of buildings, and we want to get your take on like how you handle that with your company, what your department does. But before we go there, can you tell us about your department, kind of what the response model is, and kind of just your general response to a fire, like what you get for that apparatus wise?
Yeah, sure. I'll kind of walk it back a little bit and give you just some of the history. So where we're at in Howard County, Maryland, we're smack dab in the middle of the state. We're a relatively small county, so I think it's 265 square miles. Don't quote me on that. We're on the smaller side, but we are situated such that 20 minutes toward like northeast border, we're in Baltimore City. And some of our box alarms, we might even get a Baltimore City engine on it if it's like a first few box units are going crazy. If they got major incidents in the city, we have gone there. We'll go there a couple times a year to help them out on major incidents. We'll transfer up there. To our south, we have Prince George's County, which is, I think, the 16th busiest fire department in the U.S. I volunteered there for a handful of years. It's a crazy department. You get to, I call it the immersion program. You learn a lot in a little bit of time. And then the very next jurisdiction down is the nation's capital. So we are very much a bedroom community for Fort Meade, which is in Anne Arundel. We have Annapolis, same thing, like another 30 minutes offshore east, which is the state capital, and then Baltimore City and D.C. And then as you continue west, you start getting to the mountains. Now, with Howard County, it is such an incredible mix. Like, it is, Maryland, we're East Coast, so, we've got roots back to the 1600s. A lot of our buildings, I should say a lot, we have buildings within our jurisdiction from, we have one of the original governors of the state, his original mansion built in the early 1800s. It's been on the market for years, but it's something like, it costs $6 million if anybody wants it. It's like a 24 bed, 12 bath on like 100 and some acres. So there's a lot of history. If anybody was watching the national news pre-pandemic, 2016, 2018, our Main Street, Ellicott City, flooded. We got 6.5 inches of rain in like 3 hours. It was on national news. There were a couple deaths from that. But we have our Main Street, which is where the B&L Railroad ran through. So one of the oldest railroad lines in the nation. It is like a very stereotypical Main Street, early 1800s, row homes and shops and taxpayers built on a hill. And then spreading out from there, you have the historical side. Columbia is one of the original planned communities. Anybody familiar with the Mid-Atlantic might know Meriwether Post Pavilion. It's a big concert venue that's smack dab in the middle, and it is a very mixed community. So we'll have commercial, we have the row homes, we have the single families, we have mansions, we have the human urban development restricted income areas, and we'll have everything from studio apartments where it is a very poor socioeconomic status, all the way up to multimillionaires in 15,000 square foot homes on rolling vistas and the white picket fences, and everything in between, commercial, industry. It is a very wild mix. We have routes 95 and Route 1, and Route 70, which are major thoroughfares for east, west, north, south, and there's a lot of commerce that goes through. So for being a small county, there's an incredible amount. Like, we're considered wealthy, like we have some of the wealthiest zip codes in there. But then when you get into some of those communities, we're still subject to, I think it's not so much, but definitely the drug epidemic and so many other things. Johns Hopkins is our biggest employer in the county, if you were to look up statistics. So it is just it's an incredible mix. You really do have everything. We'll have, I think our highest high rises are 14 stories. There's nothing super crazy. when you go to the Route 1 corridor where there's a lot more commercial and industry, you'll have 10 plus acres of a building under roof for manufacturing and transportation. So going from one end of the county to the other might take you 30, 40 minutes, but you're going to see everything in between. And it was just a couple years ago, some of my buddies ran a call in the complete rural West End where way back in the woods, this family hadn't had, I think they had maybe electric, but no running water in their house.
Wow.
And it was just like an original farm home that they had from out. They just kept in the family and lived there. So when I say we have everything and it is polar opposites, we have all of that. And we obviously have to respond. We have our hydrogen areas, non-hydrogen areas, and it is just a crazy mix. So we kind of have to be Johnny on the spot. Just within the first two that I typically work in downtown Columbia, we have all that. We'll have non-hydrogen areas, we have hydrogen areas, we have the mansions, we have the restricted income, the Columbia Mall, Meriwether Post. And then as you start to go towards the outskirts, you get a little bit more commonality within your first two, maybe not throwing everything, but in the kind of the central core part of the county, you can run everything within your first two, and it's really wild.
Well, so having a diverse response area, how does that affect, not even on scene yet, how does that affect how your apparatus are laid out? I mean, imagine it's almost impossible to standardize, or maybe you guys do and just somehow overcome that on scene. But I mean, the hose loads differ from each area, or like what, does anything change with equipment and like loadouts?
Oh yeah, for sure. We certainly have standards that we try to shoot for. There are definitely minimum equipment standards for our engines and special services, but oftentimes the company captain or the officers that within each company, they have the way that they want to do things. And there is a lot of commonalities and consistencies and correlations throughout our 15 firehouses, could be 14, but everybody can kind of do their own thing. So we'll detail people and firefighters all over the county to, backfill and whatnot. And it's common when you go in there, one of the first things you do, you check your BA and you start walking around the engine or the ladder truck to figure out, all right, how do you all set this up and what tools you're carrying? Because you might have, a lot of companies now will have 400-foot lines, but how they rack them and shoulder them are totally different from one firehouse to the next. It is very common to have cross lays. We are very big on using bumper lines, kind of came in out of Kentland and Prince George's County. You'll see a lot of that. And then we'll have everything from 300 and 400-foot lines coming off of our rears or the engine companies. And that's pretty common.
Yeah, the long line here in the Midwest in Missouri, specifically St. Louis metropolitan areas, is pretty uncommon to where I have yet to see anything over a 300, or I have yet to see a 300-footer, 1 3/4. It's just not a thing. Is it needed? Absolutely. It just hasn't been needed enough to sway anyone to put that much line in. It's just one thing that is super duper common out east where you're at due to the buildings, and it just hasn't made its way here, which is kind of weird, right? Because you think the further west you get, the more space you have, the more spread out everything gets. So you'd think it would be more conducive to have longer lays here, but they do a really good job when they develop out here to really have the roads, the apparatus placement, and the accessibility within that 200-foot reach. They do a really good job at designing any new construction to facilitate that. And where I think in your neck of the woods, it's so old, right? I mean, the roads were wagon, trails, right? Not so much here. So, driving in the Midwest is like driving in you're in a grid pattern. Driving out in your neck of the woods, it's crazy. Anyone who's ever driven around the state of Pennsylvania and stuff is like, everything curves. So, yeah, it's just, going up to that level of things, right? I think it all, you wouldn't think like that kind of stuff would affect like what kind of hose line is on your truck, but it all kind of does. The small stuff starts to add up. And, that's the one common thing of all my friends that work out on the East Coast is the long hose loads and the long hose stretches of 300, 400s, which is cool. You know, I wish that would come out here sooner than later, because when the fire decides to be more than 200 feet away, you know, our reflex time out here is vastly protracted comparatively to someone in your neck of the woods where it's almost, you know, to be expected, right? That's not a weird thing. It's something that's just, you have a tool for that already. And we're kind of caught off kilter for a split second. You know, obviously we have our hose bundles and our hotel packs ready to go to extend a line, but you can just tell it's a play that we don't use nearly as much as you guys do out there. So other than that, the county fire department model does not exist in Missouri. There are none that take the border of their county and use as their jurisdiction. Now there may be the word county in the title, but it's just protection districts, which is pretty common in the Midwest. Fire authorities, fire protection districts. Well, you know, they'll cover hundreds, if not more, square miles, but they don't use the municipal boundary of a county as their response area. Other than that, it's not something that's really familiar with the Midwest. So, but those departments that are out here, essentially you have the protection districts. What you cover is either you'll have within that area, it's really just two flavors, right? You'll have like the rural, and then you'll have maybe a town or two. But that's it. Unlike where you're at, to where you have every single shade of suburbia, you have high rises. What you say, 10 to 14 stories? Some of them.
14 is our tallest currently. Yeah.
I mean, anything over once you get to the 5th floor, like it's all the same, right? I mean, it's like, you know, right? Like, as far as the hose is concerned. So, that is something that does not exist in Missouri. The tall buildings only exist on the entering suburbs of the two major cities, and then one or two other minor cities. But so to have the challenges, I mean, I could just imagine what it would be like going from a tanker shuttle operation to all of a sudden now you're on a standpipe in the 9th floor somewhere. You know, like that's some pretty crazy ends of the spectrum to have to mess with tactically, strategically. You know, even like all your stuff from a mindset perspective, that we don't have to mess with here. You know, our building stock here, especially in the St. Louis area, I mean, it's 99% one type, and then you get the 1%, you know, new stuff, and once again, like we're in the opposite boat where it kind of throws us off for a second. We have to slow our roll and you know, kind of remember to kind of do some things differently when we come across a new modern building, because everything else for the most part is old in this, you know, especially in St. Louis. So yeah, that's kind of what we want to. That's the context we want to kind of wrap this episode in, is now focusing more on scene. So you have, what was they say, Ellicott City? What was the city in your area that probably has the most historic building stock? It's kind of the postcard Main Street area. So I don't know the percentage of your building stock fires, right? Like what percentage of what era the fires are in. I'm assuming you guys have more modern buildings. There's more of them, so there's going to be a higher percentage of those. So, which is normal, right? So what is it like when all of a sudden now you have one of those, the Main Street building on the 3rd floor, you know, rocking in the middle of the night? Like what is it like? Is there a noticeable change, or are those companies pretty squared away in that environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have done some really deep dives with our pre-plans to hopefully set us up for success. And we have programs when we're going down the road, whether it's an active 911 program or on our computers, where we can click a button and oftentimes we can bring up our pre-plans for a lot of these buildings, which helps. But IT is going to do what IT does. We don't always have access for one reason or another, or a lot of times they don't get updated. So you think of, I don't think a lot of people are immune to this. You have a street that was built around the horse carriages and railroads in the early 1800s. They just didn't swap over one night, and now we're in 2024. They have undergone, like I know a couple of buildings that have been your general stores. They were feed stores, and then it became a yoga studio, and now it's an ice cream shop.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And right across the street, it's a brewery and a sushi restaurant. And then above that, you've got to climb 3 stories up a hill that you have to turn sideways to get up the steps. And right above that, there's a studio apartment that some guy's been living in for 50 years, right?
Right.
So one of the last calls I think I ran there was for a brewery, and it was for, they had some type of alarm go off. I can't even remember what it was, but it was because their distillation process, ethanol was potentially blowing off, and ethanol burns clear. So he's like, we really got to be mindful of what we're walking into.
Yeah, you can't even see it, right?
On fire. You actually don't even really know it.
Right.
So that was a pretty wild response. Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and this is something that you've done a really great job educating at, is the void spaces, right? Because, there's that line, you don't make them like you used to. There's a couple media pages that I follow where the human element's going to do what the human element does, and we'll have people that were the contractors of the 1870s, but they weren't a good contractor, straight up.
Right.
And you see shoddy work.
Oh, yeah.
See shoddy work throughout all generations. That doesn't change anything. So you have tons of different generations of contracting work with all the void spaces, with multiple generations of buildings from, a lot of Main Street was heavy timber. And now you have lightweight mixed in, and you had type 3, brick and mortar, all in the exact same thing with vinyl siding, or maybe they try to keep the historical charm. And you have multiple generations of technologies and construction materials all within one, with dugout cellars. And with Main Street Ellicott City, there is literally a creek, like a small river, running underneath the entire town. So you don't even have side Charlie access. Your side Charlie, like, these houses are literally built on steel beams that are, your basement is the river. Like, it's literally over top of the creek.
Wow,
and
that's interesting.
Yeah. Access, like, some people have a shed in their backyard. You literally walk across a bridge to get to the shed.
Sure. Wow. Yeah, we've been we've been to quite a few towns where geography plays such a huge role in the buildings. Like Eureka Springs, and it's, if you've been there down to Arkansas, we've been to quite a few mountain towns that are like that. And it's crazy. They've all had catastrophic fires. They've all had catastrophic fires in those towns. It's just so strange how it works, and how they're built that way. And like, they go into it already from a geographic deficit, right? Like that's not good. But I mean, you guys already have it pre-planned to a large extent, and it's good to know, even from your conversation that you just had, or what your comments about, having to go sideways up to some person's apartment you don't know about, or the weird apartments where someone's having to, like, Charlie side access, get up on a roof to walk to their apartment, like that kind of weird stuff. And then I'm assuming you use your EMS runs as kind of your recon. I mean, you have ALS engine companies, right?
Yeah. So every medic unit, there's at least one medic unit that has an ALS presence on it. We do have some BLS ambos. A lot of our suppression, it's a good chance you'll have a medic on it. That's not necessarily a standard or a mandate anymore. But, with 80% of our runs being EMS, we're always out on the road. That's a major thoroughfare to some degree, just for Main Street out in the city specifically. And the officers down there are pretty diligent about just getting out and walking the streets.
Sure.
And it is just, we take that opportunity to get down there. And it is a historical section because of the floods. There's been a large support network that has tried to get the town rebuilt. I'd say it's pretty much up and coming, but there were buildings down at the very bottom of the section that were from the 1800s, completely historic, and now they've been wiped off the map because it's too dangerous to basically build again. They're turned into a playground, I think.
Wow.
But yeah, we're constantly getting out there and just walking the streets because it's changing literally weekly, with other people coming in, shops closing down because of just the economics, a new one coming in. And then as you spread out from there, again, it's at the bottom of a bowl, so you're going uphill, and you have some major historic, just single families just outside of that. And then because of our area and our proximity to government and industry and research labs, we just knocked down one house, and then within 6 months, there's a row of 12 townhomes where a single family once stood.
Yeah.
So you got a 200-year-old home, next to a townhouse that is, vinyl gasoline siding, and it went up in 6 months.
So are
And that was the
they,
whole family living there.
those new houses that they're putting in, are they trying to make them look old where it could trip you up at 3 o'clock in the morning, or are they pretty obvious that you can quickly see that it's something new?
There's a couple communities where that's definitely happening, but by and large, it's fairly obvious. I think the biggest things that will catch us now is what they're doing with the attics. Some of them, depending on how much money you want to pay, that attic is literally just going to be a non-usable, just plenum space where they're running HVAC. But you're the next door neighbor, the next townhouse that you share a wall with. They may have paid extra money to make that a full living space with a balcony off the back for like a little sunset drinking cocktail deck, And then we'll have it set up to where the windows in the dormers, they look real. It looks like living spaces. It's absolutely nothing. That's where the HVAC is. But your next door neighbor, that's their master bedroom. And sometimes you really don't know. And that's how we have to be careful on size up. It's like, hey, it appears to be a 3-story. I'm going to update you as soon as I go interior to let you know whether this space is actually a living space. So we only truly have 2 floors of interior fighting to worry about. And that attic is truly just an attic with maybe a little bit of storage.
Sure. Yeah, that's something that we just picked up on in doing a program for the newer apartment complexes, the type 5, 3 to 5 story apartment complexes. When you're doing your VES profile, I pulled some floor plans on this particular complex, and some balconies went to bedrooms, some balconies went to living rooms. The windows look identical. You have no idea. You have no idea what you're opening up to go into. So you go into this window expecting a bedroom and a door. Well, obviously you have no door. You're on someone's sofa, and now you're in someone's living room. Well, I mean, you can see where that could be bad, right? So, and I don't know there's no way to know. I mean, unless you just memorize the 4 or 5 different floor plan options, which that's ridiculous. No one's going to do that. That almost takes that play out of the book. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, it just depends. I guess if you don't have the conditions to make it super risky and you have the time, maybe dipping through a living room window wouldn't be so bad, but there could definitely be some times where that would be a catastrophic consequence. So yeah, I understand that's a huge challenge, and especially if you have a high rate of redevelopment, sounds like you guys do, that really puts you guys, having to get out there, and it sounds like you've definitely taken the initiative and, gotten out there, either using your EMS runs to their fullest extent or just having some sort of monthly program. Each company does a certain amount of inspections, and then using your fire alarms is the best training tool also, because
Absolutely.
Other than, automatic alarms or EMS calls, like how else are you really getting in the residential space, right? I mean, you're not going to knock on their door, and they're not going to, that would be weird. But so to use those 2 calls to extort them is best and capitalize off the information, especially in a place like where you work, where you could have 5 different flavors of building in the same day, for 5 different calls, whether it's a gas call, a fire call, a medical call, or a rescue call. You could be in 5 different generations of buildings. So
kind of,
there's 2 main things that we do to get ourselves in these buildings more. The one, when I was assigned to downtown Columbia, it could be any day, but especially on Thursdays, that was kind of what we wrapped our minds around. This is area familiarization day. And we are going to really hammer and hone in on Thursdays being, let's get into these buildings or developments that maybe we haven't revisited or we know presents challenges. And that was our focus on a Thursday. Something that we did every single morning, and I still try to do when I'm out in my position now, is, and we've talked about this, I jump on Zillow and I just start looking at the listings of things that have come up. And I mean, they open the keys, they give you the keys to the castle. Like, I will pull up Zillow and find the craziest things I can find, because now you have 30 to 80 pictures of all the DIYs that this person did, and you get to see the layout of how this specific community is set up. And I can't tell you how many times within a couple months' time we're running a call there, maybe we run a fire there. It sets us up for success. We kind of know how that building's laid out. If it's vacant, sometimes we'll even go there and start pulling lines if it's something weird, because we know nobody's home. A lot of times the neighbor will come out, and because we're the fire service, generally we're seen in a better light. Like, hey, we heard that you guys have this crazy loft thing in your 3rd floor. What's that like? sometimes they'll even invite us in their homes. And
Oh,
we've
that's
learned
cool.
so much. But like Zillow and just getting out there has done a lot. And like I said, we have typically run calls and crews just start splitting off in different areas because they know the challenges. And second and third new companies like, how in the hell did you know that?
Yeah.
It's like, man, we're pulling lines in these communities, and we just did a size up drill on this 2 weeks ago, and we pulled off the listing off of Zillow, and it's done a lot of good for us.
Awesome.
So that kind of answers my question. But maybe you have some more stuff you do, like pre-fire when you've got like new kids coming on, or even guys transferring to different houses. What are you guys doing to familiarize yourselves with all the different kinds of construction? Are you just doing what you said, like just getting in the streets? Do you guys do classes? Is there an academy? Like, kind of, what do you do to set each other up for success with that?
Yeah, so a lot of it is very company based, but from what our companies did, where I was assigned, we did devote at least one day of the week to that, and we do the size of drills every single day. Outside of that, every single EMS run, we just start pointing things out to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to this, pay attention to this. Those first 6 to 12 months that they're in the field with us, there are a couple of communities that we know these are our challenges, and every first due within the county has their own challenges. And it's pretty common that, all right, we're going to spend a day and we're going to get out here and we're going to show you exactly what we mean, and this is what you're going to do. One of them is Partridge Courts for us. Partridge Courts, the entire community, some of it's townhomes, some of it's garden apartments, but a lot of them from Side Alpha, they look like 2-story townhomes. You grind to the backside, it looks like a 3-story townhome, but the basement is actually a single-story or studio apartment underneath of the 2-story. So it's actually 2 separate living spaces that you can't access from the interior. We have good pre-plans for that, but if you are not familiar with that community, you will get turned around and absolutely end up in the wrong apartment or go above the fire and have no idea. And that has happened multiple times. So that's one. The downtown Columbia, which is one of the first planned communities, we say contemporary, maybe a mid-century modern, where it's so hard to explain. It's really like nowhere else, where they are built like something out of the Hobbits. Like I don't even know. And they have all these half stories. So from the outside, it might look like a 2 or 3 story house, but once you get inside, imagine the house is cut in half, and every level is at a half level. So it's not a full run of steps. It's 6 steps to get to every level, and there's probably 6 different ones in there. That presents massive issues. Going back to Ellicott City, 2 stories from the front, you might have 4 or 5 stories on the rear because of the grade changes. Mm-hmm. What's really gotten to be popular, and how we're now, just because of the population density on the Route 1 corridor, we call them donut buildings, or the Texas donuts, that are really popular down in the south, where it's a parking garage in the middle. Mm-hmm. On all 4 sides, they build the apartment buildings around all 4 sides. And then the bottom first main level is generally commercial, like restaurants and nail spas and, things like that. Some of them, for us, the parking garages run 6 stories underground. They're so deep in the ground, they have to have a sub pump that runs 24/7 to shoot the groundwater out of them, or else the whole 2 floors of the parking garages will flood. So we just get out in these buildings all the time. And if you go more than a couple weeks, like, you start forgetting. And there's a couple of them that every firefighter, if you ask them, like for one of them, high hazardous Swift string, almost every firefighter that's assigned to downtown Columbia probably has a pre-plan printed out of Swift string in their turnout code. And you will never make it unless you have that pre-plan.
Wow. So
it's insane.
So you bring up a good point. So how do you guys share information interdepartmentally? Because say, that your company's it's out of service, or something, you're on a different fire, so now you have a mutual aid company or a move up company, someone who's unfamiliar. You can understand where that would be a problem, right? So how do you guys share information? Is this going into a CAD system, or do you guys get the information out to the rest of the companies for those move up companies, or for someone who maybe riding the seat that day who's completely unfamiliar with the environment?
Yeah, so there's some practical administrative things we do, and then there's some other cultural things and hurdles that we have to overcome. So to break that out, we have an intranet computer-based county system that we have folders in, and we upload everything. So you can go through every firehouse's first due, and then you can start picking apart everything that they've uploaded.
Cool.
Most companies have their first due map books, and things are sitting in the front of the wagon. Everybody organizes them a little bit differently, but some of our buildings now are so incredibly challenging. There is no way you can remember it all. You have to have the pre-plan in your hand. And I can't tell you how many medical calls and fire runs I've been on where I have a 30-page document for one building, and it's laminated, it's bindered, and I have that thing, and that is the only way I will get myself in and out of this building and get to the right apartment.
Wow.
And that's what we do. Like, I'll challenge people. Sometimes it's easy for the officers to go and do a pre-planned thing and just get used to the building. The firefighters are sitting out back. I'll hand them something like, all right, go to apartment 402. I hand them the pre-plan, and for the next 15 minutes, like ducks in a row, we're all trying to figure out where 402 is.
Sure.
Because it is that, like, core of the building. Outside of that, some of it is going to be where I was getting into the culture side of it. There's not a good way if like a Montgomery County unit transfers into us, there's not a good way to get them that information. So we really are going to rely heavily on a battalion chief to get that information out, or we'll run up and maybe hand them, like, we'll print out multiple pre-plans of certain buildings because we know they're so awful, and we'll start handing them out to people. But that really comes up just to the prep of that individual company and how well they know their target hazards, which are just constantly going up in Howard County right now.
Yeah, I know the biggest thing we get hung up on is like door codes, just simple access. You know, I mean, not everything has a Knox box key on it, and that's if the Knox box system is working that day. But like, yeah, key fobs, you know, that kind of stuff. Like, that's one of the biggest challenges we have for when we're out of area, is just getting in the building itself. And then, like you said, from there, then it's a whole other challenge of like, well, what floor is 4802 on? You know, like sometimes that isn't the fourth floor. You know, that could mean all sorts of stuff. And then they don't have maps on the wall, so you have no idea. You're going 30 feet in the wrong direction until you realize the numbers are going the wrong direction, and you got to turn around. And yeah, it's not, and especially when they make, like you said out there, you have mill type heavy timber. When they turn those into residential apartments, that's where the insanity starts, because nothing makes any sense. When they start infilling old buildings with newer apartments, man, the layouts just go crazy. So,
have you guys had any specific experiences where maybe like building caught you off guard and like taught you something, or made you realize that you needed to change kind of your approach, or has all the stuff that you've been doing kind of set you up for mostly success?
Oh, it's been both. It is 100% been both. There have been times where we get into these buildings and we realize that maybe they did some massive construction project and we had no idea. Or one of the buildings I was talking about, Swiftstream, imagine multiple Texas donuts and they're attached, but they've been around since like the 60s or 70s. So it's a lot of garden style apartments, and they're all connected by balconies and like external walkways. But when you are in building 2, you might be on the second floor, you're on the exact same balcony. You go to the next building, you might be on level 4 now, and it's a number completely different. That has presented massive issues, and their sprinkler system is so poor. Every single time we've charged it for standpipes or whatever, it completely blows apart. And so that has caught us where we're running working fires in there. Somebody's yelling for water, and then we realize, the sprinkler system is just completely gutted and it's flooding out some other apartment building because it wasn't tested well. They repair it, it busts again. They repair it, they test it, it busted again. And then finally they repair it and stop testing it. So we will go also through generations of different officers and different technology coming in, where we used to run large leader lines, 2 and 3 inch lines with a gated Y, bring it to the center of a court, and then you split off of there. Now there are companies that are like, hey, we'll run our 4, we'll stretch out to 5, even 600 feet, and they'll pre-plan, well, if I know I put my tailboard at this hallway, I know I can reach that furthest apartment. Cool. And so
good for them.
Now there's a little bit of a generational gap between who shows up on scene. And I don't mean to jump ahead too much, and you can catch me if I am. We'll run a box alarm I'm a big fan of the orders setting expectations. You try to work within that, but you can also deviate.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, if you're dispatched third, but if you show up first, you still take first. You don't wait for third.
Correct.
And vice versa. And me personally, I'm a fan of that. Whereas some of these buildings are so challenging, we'll have the first engine and truck go in, and the commanding officer, battalion chief, whoever is like, hey, everybody else, we're going to level 1 stage, maybe even level 2 stage out on this road, stay away. Well, once we figure out what the hell's going on in this building, then we're going to start calling you in one by one and assigning you. And that's been pretty common in our culture here recently with some of these challenging buildings is stage everybody out. You almost send your search companies through to figure out what the heck's going on,
mm-hmm.
and then we'll call you in.
And that's how we handle our medical facilities. It's not just a hospital, right? It's like 15 different buildings. You might be in 15 different versions of a high-rise, and you have a general floor, but you don't really know the extent of it. And so we'll usually send 1 or 2 companies up, and then everyone will be ready to rock just in the lobby or just outside on the street. But and that's the best way to do it. Was the last thing you want to do is find a problem and realize and pull everyone. Now all those companies are rushing to try to find their way out of the building and into the proper part of the building. We do the same thing with college campuses. Obviously, anything weird and large, Busch Stadium, a sports stadium, like anything casino. I'm sure, I don't know if you have a casino, but like those places, that would definitely be the best thing to do is to send a recon company, and then everyone's right there to be deployed as needed instead of having to, have 5 or 6 companies find their way out of the maze and then do that. So that just makes sense, and that's good.
Yeah, I completely agree. We use this very same strategy. The one thing I caution it is that oftentimes we'll use that exact same strategy for a single family home.
Oh, yeah.
And that will catch us in a different way because that has become so ingrained in our culture that we just stage everybody out. Like it's the first thing you say. Mm-hmm. And then it ends up being a kick and fire. And now you got to have everybody come in to their assignments as they normally should have if they just follow the general order. Maybe set up, maybe you don't even have to get off the apparatus, but stage and position as if you were going to work.
Right.
And then you can actually go to work. Stop staging people out. So sometimes that's a bit of a bump or a bit of a cultural thing that we
anyone uses that response model runs into that eventually. I've seen that out here too, a working fire, and you'll hear on the radio level 1 staging after the first company said like pulling a line working fire, right? So like everybody I think experiences that a little bit, and for whatever reason it just is a hard habit to break. But
Well, cool. Well, here we are. We just want to do a kind of quick and short one. We're already almost pushing 45 minutes here. So like I said, we can talk about this stuff for forever and ever. The one last question I wanted to hit on was, how does the newer and older construction and the challenges that poses in your large area, how does that affect your roof operations? Because that seems to be one of the decisive kinds of it's either this or that on the roof stuff, right? Like the modern stuff, not a lot of people are messing with the roofs, understandably, for whatever reasons, whether it's cultural or actual, pragmatic. But then the older style buildings, we all know what happens if you're afraid to get on a roof in a fire in a cockloft, right? Like you're not going to have a main street much longer. So how does that work with your ladder companies? That's 2 separate mindsets that you kind of have to know which one to be in, which I find, I don't have to much less work. I don't really have to worry about that where I work.
Yeah, no, that's, again, we go back to the culture and generations of where we're at and what fire department shows up that day. We're a 24-48 department with 3 different battalions. So that's almost 9 different departments. And we will have it to where, we have straight stick trucks, we have tiller trucks, we have tower ladders, and we will actually set up to where some of the ladder trucks are being told, hey, listen, we're not going to go on these roofs. Like, this is lightweight.
Sure.
The battalion chief says, no, you're not getting on it. And then you might have an experienced company captain that's assigned to that ladder truck says, hey, listen, I think we got this, or maybe an interior crew saying, hey, could you help us out a little bit? It's basically, it's almost conversational. Like whether it's face-to-face or over the radio, it's a quick check-in to see, hey, I think we got this. We're checking conditions. We're doing roof reports. We're going to go in and do it. And there are some, like I said, some battalion chiefs are like, absolutely not. I don't want to go as far as saying they're scared of the roof, but they will, hey, I've seen too many bad things happen. We'll figure out another way to go about it, right, wrong, or indifferent. But I can't tell you how many times I've been up on the second floor in the attic and you hear that saws run and even the fire's out. You think, the problem has largely gone away, and they open up that roof and I can't tell you, like, it drops 30, 50 degrees within seconds, and it's helping things out. So we do have a couple towers in the county, and a lot of times they will operate off the bucket if they have to. Those companies have done really well with getting roofs open from that position. So we only have 3 dedicated ladder trucks right now. There are some plans for more to come online. And we have some volunteer companies or shared status crews, depending on how things are dispatched. You might get some more. But yeah, man, it's kind of a toss-up depending on what we're going to. I'm not saying that we won't get on the roofs, because we absolutely will. I've been on plenty of them. It just depends on conditions and what kind of officers you have.
Yeah, I could just see how if the area if you're on a ladder truck, or I don't know if you cross staff or permanently, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I could just see how if you're in an area where it's just modern single family homes where it will roof up. I mean, yeah, like that's probably not going to be a thing there. But then if you're assigned in the older part of town, well, now that's if you're on that ladder company, well, I mean, roof ops, maybe that's going to be your thing, like that. I mean, that's a much larger that's a much larger portion of the conversation, right? And I could just see how that's just very interesting to, like I said, where we work. I mean, it's just, we don't have to worry about that type of thing. Now, if we do roll up on something like modern lightweight, it's kind of that would be a conversation on scene where the battalion chief would be like, yeah, we're going to get this one from the bucket or something if we need to. But it's not just the whole area, though. It's interesting how you guys have to deal with that kind of stuff. Because we've been to a lot of small decision. Right. We've been to a lot of small towns to where they're not even equipped to get on a roof in a main street setting. They don't have a circular saw. They just have a chainsaw with not even a carbide tip blade. They have no notion of the requirements that are needed for a void space fire on a top floor in an old Main Street legacy environment. It's mind blowing that the fire service is so atrophied in that aspect. Which luckily in your case, even though you do have a lot of newer construction pressuring that culture, you guys have still adapted and worked around every single angle, it seems like. So that's good.
Yeah, like I said, we know that there's a battalion chief or two that if he's working that day, we know we're not going to get on a roof. He's just not going to allow it because it keeps that person out too much. But there are some really highly experienced individuals that have a lot of time on that. There's no question if they say we're good to go on this roof, like, let's go and make it happen. It's going to get done quick. And we have so many, I can't tell you how many different roofs I've been on that I'm cutting open, from the commercial to the timber to the 1950s garden apartment and everything in between. The thing that we're dealing with right now is that we are going through so many retirements and we're hiring so many new people. I think half of our department has less than like 5 years on or something crazy like that. So to get that core group that are going to be on the roofs up to the speed and experience that we need them to be, as hundreds of years of experience, are leaving, it's definitely going to be our new challenge. Like, we're getting ready. We just graduated class. We have another class in the academy, and our application period just opened again. Anybody that wants to come work in Howard County. So we're just hiring like crazy. And so that's going to be our struggle. I mean, as I think, a lot of departments are experiencing.
Everyone's in the same boat.
So. It sounds like you guys are doing a pretty good job, though, of keeping your members engaged and sharing as much of that education as you can. I mean, some places I feel like almost stick their head in the sand and hope that they'll figure it out when it gets there. And it sounds like you guys are doing a little bit of the opposite, which is good.
Yeah, a lot of the departments around here that would have a similar building stock or situation where it's a massively growing, newer construction type area, they just kind of seem to forget about the old part of town until there was an issue and a fire, and then they kind of forget how to fight the fire in those old buildings. And that's really kind of where our entire program kind of came from, because we we wanted to, limit that reflex time and get people back focusing on the old buildings. Even we understand that they're, it's a low frequency event, but to be able to just pivot and have a plan is the main thing. And it seems like out here, it's just very easy to kind of start focusing on the newer stuff and then forget about the old building. So it sounds like you guys have that handled. So not a problem, which is good. So I think it says a lot about Howard County.
Yeah, we're certainly trying, and it's definitely largely dependent on the company officers and the company culture. There are some that are kicking their feet up, but that's just the human element, and there are some that are doing a really great job. Some things are getting the academy, and a lot of it's up to us. So we create our own problems if we're not doing it, And I was just reminded, some of Main Street, like the city, we have had Maydays in those old buildings.
Wow.
We get turned around. We've had some issues out of there. We just had a Mayday out on the west end from a barn fire and barn collapse, and everything in between. So it's yeah.
I can definitively say there will be no barn fires in the city of St. Louis in my career.
But
Crazy, but I appreciate what you guys are doing too, because I've just with your presentations, I've been learning a lot. It's keeping me in the mindset of I need to pay close attention, because it gets us turned around, and it's something that we largely take for granted, especially where I work, where you have almost everything. It has definitely caught us.
I think it forces you guys maybe to stay more engaged than other places who have, a majority of one type or the other, because we can kind of essentially get complacent, right? We're used to going to the same type of building over and over again. So when it's different, it catches us off guard. Where you guys, everything's different. So you don't have the ability to kind of just relax, right? So that's kind of one of the benefits to the situation you guys are into. So, but anyways, no, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's probably our issue is that there's so much to know. Sometimes it's like, there's no way I can remember all this.
Right.
And it's like drinking through a fire hose and we kick our feet up. So as long as we are able to push back on that mentality, we'll be okay.
For sure.
But, yeah.
But
cool. Well, it's awesome to hear, someone like yourself, having essentially forced to be a full spectrum firefighter, right? Like that's cool. We were just talking about this, right? Generalist or specialist, like the pros and cons of both. So I think that fits into one of those categories. But thank you for giving us your time, and we'll see when we see you. We'll be seeing each other here. I'm assuming not too. I don't know when we're gonna be around each other again, but we're running to each other. So.
Oh, for sure. No, I appreciate it. Appreciate everything you're doing. I appreciate the support. Always love picking your all's brains and the content that you're putting out there. Maybe end of the year, some of these other training events that are coming up, maybe we'll run into each other. It'd be awesome. More hotel lobby beers.
Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah. Before we go, I always forget to ask, what are you reading these days?
Oh, actually, I have it right here. Why We Make Mistakes.
Okay.
By, is that Paul and Joseph Hallinan? This is a cool one.
I've heard of the title, have not read it.
It's the Fear of Adventure, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
It's a scientist and adventure-seeking person that digs into the research of fear.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Adventure type stuff. So
awesome.
Yeah, that psychology stuff, man, is getting me.
Yeah, man.
It's the good stuff.
Reading's where it's at, man. Reading is where it's at. That's the one thing. If someone wants to make a mission for themselves, man, make it reading into the fire service.
And not even necessarily fire service books, just
reading.
Reading.
Yeah.
Just reading.
So. Yes, 99% has nothing to do with the fire service, and it's 100% maybe better in the fire service.
Right,
oh,
yeah.
For sure.
So crazy how that works.
But anyways, thanks again, Josh. We appreciate you.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Main Street Firefighting, a podcast by Fire Engineering. We hope it was worth your time. As always, if you have questions or a topic you'd like to discuss, please reach out. Until then, stay safe and have a good night.
Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by enforced technology. Only from Tenkata Protective Fabrics.